Keep Our Republic is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Since the spring of 2020, we've been doing our part to help keep our republic. We do it through hyper-localized civic education. We talk with Americans through town halls, through legal seminars, media briefings, and other events. We know a lot of Americans have a lot of questions about how our elections work, what safeguards are in place, and who actually is working behind the scenes on election night as the votes are being tabulated. And that's why we're really glad you're joining us today. Hopefully, we can answer some of those questions.
Welcome back, everyone, to Keepers of Our Republic, a podcast here at Keep Our Republic. My name is Brooke Bergen. I am the Special Projects Manager here. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Keep Our Republic is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We're working to strengthen trust in our elections and in our democratic institutions. Joining us today is none other than Keep Our Republic's newest staff member, Kamryn Hoadley. She is joining us as the Michigan Senior Advisor. Kamryn has spent basically her entire life in and around election administration, which we are excited to jump into today. She has previously worked in elections in Genesee, Saginaw, and Oakland counties in Michigan. And we're so excited to have her at our organization and today on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
So I hinted in the intro, but you have kind of a long history working in elections. Dare I say it is the family business. So how did you get started working in election administration? Take us all the way back.
So, my mom started as a deputy clerk when I was around 1 year old, and elections quickly become a family business when you're the one running them. So, in the past, there was a big struggle to get people to come and work the elections.
Hmm.
So, it's pretty common to just pull your family in to come and work the elections. Um, I worked officially my first election when I was 16 years old, but I was in the office pretty much constantly trying to help file as much as a kid can. But that's essentially where I got my introduction to it.
Do you have what is your first memory of elections as a kid, or did you not even notice that this wasn't something that every family did?
I definitely didn't notice that it wasn't something every family did, but I would say the first thing that introduced me to it not being normal is my mom would come to my elementary school classes and she'd put on mock elections for us. She'd bring the machine, bring fake ballots where you voted your favorite color, and all the kids would be like, "Oh, this is the coolest thing ever." And I'd be like, "This is my everyday. Like, what are you talking about?" But that
This
was
is what I
always
play
so
with
much
at
fun.
home. This is
Yes.
That's so fun. So 16 comes around and you're gonna work your first election. Do you remember much about that?
I do. It was the presidential for 2016. It was absolutely insane. The voter turnout was the coolest thing ever. My mom still talks about it being pretty unprecedented in their area. So it was kind of tossing me into the deep end, but it was really fun.
And then you went to college out here on the East Coast, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, I went to
Okay.
U of M in Ann
Oh,
Arbor.
very nice. And then go blue. That's what my husband tells
Yeah.
me I'm supposed to say. So did you know you wanted to continue working in elections, or did you want to maybe try something different?
So I actually went to school to study medicine. And it took me about 2 years to be like, no, this isn't for me. And my mom would always say, whatever you do, you need to be passionate about. She didn't really care what I did as long as I loved it. And I was like, well, I've always been passionate about working elections, so let's see what I can do with that. And kind of took off from there, studied political science and anthropology, and fell even further in love with the idea of elections and helping people and made my career out of it.
So you've worked in a number of places in and around Michigan. Can you sort of walk us through your professional elections experience once you got out of college?
Yes, so actually, before I officially graduated, but we were doing school online, I got a job at Mundy Township, which was right close to home where I lived, and I was their deputy clerk, but the election administrator. And I was there for a while. They were really, really kind to let me, like, I'd take 2 hours during the day and finish up my classes, and they worked with me really well with that. And they taught me more than I could have ever imagined about actually being the one in charge. And then there was an opportunity that opened at the city of Frankenmuth in Saginaw County to be their city clerk. So I was like, oh, that sounds perfect. And I applied, got that role. And the city of Frankenmuth is relatively small. It's a tourist city, so there's always a ton of people there, but actual voting population is very tiny. And I found myself a little bit bored on election day. They have very high
Feels hard
voter
to
turnout.
imagine for anyone
I
that's
know.
worked in elections.
They have incredibly high voter turnout, which is really cool. But when you only have around 4,000 people, high voter turnout is still a quiet day.
Yeah.
So then I saw an opening at the city of Pontiac, and I was like, I doubt I'll be bored here. And I wasn't ever bored.
How
So,
big is Pontiac, like approximately, for those who aren't familiar
so
with Michigan?
between 50 and 60,000 voters.
Oh, so a big step up from the
Yes.
4,000 you were. Yeah.
Yes, it was. There is relatively low voter turnout, but even if half the people came, it was way more than I was dealing with at
Yeah.
Frankenmuth. So it was always super busy. And one thing I loved about the larger city is in smaller cities, election day kind of just happens. Like they know they're going to vote, it's whatever. But in larger cities, it's a community event. Like
Mm.
there's food trucks, there's loud music, they turn it into a bit of a party. And that made the day so much fun for me to go around, see everybody, see how many people, even if they weren't voting, just showed out to get other people to vote. It was always super fun.
What what was sort of the biggest change you noticed or thing that took you by surprise going from these smaller towns and townships into a city like Pontiac?
I would say how early we start planning for the election. So the election isn't just one day when you're in the clerk's office. It's
Right.
typically a couple months before. But my team and I at the city of Pontiac, it would be the primary election night. We'd have wrapped up everything and we're already talking about what we're doing for November. Like
Wow.
there was really no stop and pause. And that took me by surprise. I was always like, let's just give it a breather and then we can think about it. But no, it's straight into the next one.
No time for breather.
No.
Um, so you were at was Pontiac your last position until most recently, or did you go somewhere
Yeah.
after that? Okay, very cool. And how long were you in Pontiac?
About a year and 6 months.
Okay. What do you have a favorite memory of that time or something that really stood out in your professional election administration experience?
I would say this most recent election they had, it was a local election, which are always so exciting and a little bit scary because everything's changing or has the potential to change. And seeing just the people root for each other was really, really cool in a large city like that. You wouldn't think, of course, it's not the biggest city in the world, but 60,000 voters, you wouldn't think everybody knew everyone, but that's kind of how it felt. And I was welcomed into that family. So it was really cool to just be a part of the block parties and the cookouts that were happening for this election.
For those of you who are just listening, not watching, you might not realize that Cameron's probably, all due respect to our previous guests, one of the younger guests we've had on the pod, but you've probably been around more elections than almost anyone we've talked to just by proximity, and then of course working at them starting at a very young age. What do you think, or what do you remember has changed the most over time that really sticks out to you in terms of election administration in Michigan?
I would say the, I don't even want to say public awareness, but it does fall in line with that. So typically, People would come up, get their ballot, put their ballot through the machine. It was just normal. Now people are asking questions, which is really wonderful. People want to be involved in the process. There is the issue of people not generally believing election administrators when they give answers.
Mm,
But I think the public involvement that has grown in the last 10 years since I started has been pretty incredible to see. It's definitely makes the job even more fulfilling than it was because people are noticing what's actually happening.
right. What kind of questions have you noticed an uptick in election officials having to deal with more?
I would say a really big one is what happens after a voter mails their ballot in.
Mm,
So that didn't seem to be something people were worried about that process in the past, and now they it seems like there was a really big assumption that the ballot comes in the mail, we open it immediately, run it through a machine. That's not how it is. So those ballots still go through the machine on election day. There's a whole assembly line process to ensure that the vote is kept secret. And before, I had never received questions about that, but now I
mm.
do. And I'm able to actually explain that process, which was really cool.
Has Michigan had any substantial changes to its mail-in? I know a lot of states in the past couple of years have made big changes to their mail-in procedures. Has that been the case in Michigan?
So we recently had a change. We had a permanent absentee list
Hmm.
where voters were on a list to receive an application for a ballot every election year. Now they've done away with that application process, so you just get on the permanent ballot list. So if you're on that list, you're automatically mailed a ballot. You don't have to fiddle with the application every single time, which has caused some major confusion, I would say, just because people were anticipating applications. So they were very worried they weren't getting their ballots.
Right.
But I think it makes it a lot easier for voters because it's kind of a stark reminder that there's an election right now. Here's your ballot.
So you mentioned that your first election that you worked was in 2016. So you have worked at a very interesting time in elections. You had 2016 general election, 2020, and then 2024. All pretty historic and intense for election administrators sort of across the board. What has been, especially these last elections, what has been sort of your experience in seeing how the job of election administration and the focus on election administrators has changed over that time?
I would say 2020 was the most challenging just because we were trying to administer an election in the heat of COVID.
Hmm.
So I don't really even know how we got through it. Historically, a lot of election workers are more aged than others, and they were terrified to come and work, understandably. So we had a very low worker turnout, I would say. So it was trying to find people that were willing to come. We did have several safeguards in process, like the shields and masks and all of that, but it's still scary. There's going to
Yeah.
be a lot of people there. So it was trying to find new people, get them trained to be at the level of the people that have worked for the last 50 years, and then toss them into a presidential. So that was insane. And the amount of absentee ballots that came in because of COVID was completely unexpected. So that was a lot to process. I was actually working at my mom's office at that time, and it was mid-October, and she left to get us all lunch in the office and got into a car accident, totaled her car.
Oh,
And the cops picked her up, brought her back to the office to continue working because we were so busy that we couldn't be down a man.
right.
So it was that kind of just
Wow.
chaos.
Your mom's okay, I
Oh,
assume.
she was
Okay, great.
fine. She was pretty upset about her car and having to come back. But like she dusted off the airbag and just went on her way.
Well, so I want to talk about one thing you mentioned just there, and it's that I think a lot of people don't realize the institutional knowledge and the value of experience that repeat volunteers bring to the election process. Can you talk about sort of what, I think a lot of people who haven't worked directly on election day might just assume, you come in, you get, 30 minutes of training, and then, you take names when people come in. But there's so much more to it. And when people aren't able to come back who have been working in elections for years, decades, there's a huge knowledge gap that's lost. So can you talk about that just really briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. It is something that's hard to show in training, election day. So it's always easier to have your election workers, if you have a new one, work a primary, kind of get that immediate knowledge because you can do a mock election with your workers, but it doesn't feel the same as election day. The pressure's not on. So it is very difficult to even try to explain the process by PowerPoint, verbally, anything to someone who's new. So to have someone that's worked elections for the last 20, 30 years, they know what to expect. They've seen the craziest things, they've experienced technology changes, whether they liked it or not, and they've gone through and made it work. So there's just a trust that the clerk will have with these workers. And there are precincts that are bigger than others, or that are going to be a little bit more hectic, and you put your seasoned workers specifically in there. And when you don't have workers that have that regular knowledge of what to do, it's very difficult to know where to put them.
That is fascinating, and I think raises another question that I had. So you mentioned that most of these workers are on the older side. Makes sense. These are people that have the time to, come and work in the middle of a
Mhm.
workday to volunteer. Obviously, you bring a really different perspective because you're on the younger side, which I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like that has to be an anomaly being someone so young working in elections. Were most of your colleagues or peers older than you, or are you seeing people sort of in our age demographic getting involved in election administration?
So I was generally an outlier in all of the offices I worked. Michigan has these big, vast clerk conferences, and I would see a handful of people my age, but that was generally it.
Yeah. What do you think we can do to, because obviously eventually that, people will retire, they're not going to come out to either volunteer or work full time in administration. Like we're going to need a new generation of people to step up and take these jobs who may not have the experience. What do you think we need to be doing if you were to hazard a guess to get people, millennial and younger, more involved in civic administration, in election administration?
One thing I have always done is reach out to local universities or even high schools. So high schools, it's a little bit harder to retain the workers because they generally would only work an August election to not most parents, unlike my own, aren't letting their kids skip school to go work
Yeah.
an election. But in August, it's great volunteer hours. If they're in National Honor Society, anything like that, you need those volunteer hours. And in the local universities, I would go to the head of the political science department. Just say, hey, toss this out, see if anyone's interested. And it pays decently. Some places give food, things like that. What you can do to draw in a college student. And I had wonderful success with that, specifically in Pontiac and Oakland University. I would have, in the time I was there, I think I had around 30 students start in the student cohort of election workers. And more than half of them continued coming back. Like they really enjoyed seeing it. They did request specific roles. They wanted to be the one on the laptop or they wanted to do certain things, but whatever. I was just very happy to have them there. So it's not something I think a lot of young people are mindful of as an option. I don't think I would have been if I hadn't been thrust into it at 16 years old. So just getting the word out a little bit more that this, you can come, you can work, you can see the process from start to finish, and it's pretty awesome.
It's great. I mean, yes, I think we all remember our college days where it's like, oh, free pizza? Yeah, I'll do it for
Right.
free. I'll do it for free pizza. So let's pivot before I let you go. Let's pivot briefly and talk about Keep Our Republic. As I said, you just joined as our new Michigan senior advisor. What interested you in leaving full-time election work and going into the nonprofit sector?
So, a big part of it was the different level of reach that I could have. So, I loved my small communities. I loved being there for them and helping them, but it didn't feel like enough. And with Keep Our Republic, there is a much broader reach. I get to talk to people in the UP that I never would have working for the city of Pontiac. So that's really wonderful, but it lets me continue my passion. So my passion for voting and the voters and the clerks and the state, I get to maintain that and really focus on the civic education aspect, which, to be completely honest, clerks wear a million different hats. It's not easy to put civic education, town halls, things like that at the forefront. It's kind of more on the back end. So to be able to do that from this role is incredibly exciting.
Are there any particular events or things you have on the horizon that you're excited about for this next year?
Yes, I am very excited to meet with some clerks in the Grand Rapids area. It is in the dead of winter, so I'm a little bit nervous for that. But anyone from Michigan would understand that. But I am very excited to hear different perspectives from the west side, as I've always been more in the Flint area. So it's something I'm very excited about.
Awesome. Well, we are excited to have you on board. I've been really excited to get to talk to you, and I know that you're going to do some great and really interesting things up there in Michigan and with Keep Our Republic in general. Before I let you go, I've been asking my guests one last question. We are filming this in the beginning of December. You're buried under lake effect snow. It's raining and freezing here in DC, but New Year's is just around the corner. And so I'm asking everyone, it's been no secret, a bit of a downer year in a lot of sectors, in politics, in election. So what is something that you think is reason to hope going into 2026, this next election cycle? What can we be excited about? What can we be optimistic about in these times?
I would say a reason to be excited is that there's always room for growth and people are always evolving. So I think there's a new force coming through of people wanting to stand up for themselves, wanting to learn more about different processes they haven't really cared as much about. And I think that shows some really great growth within at least Michigan, I'm hoping everywhere. But that's what I see here, and it gives me a lot of hope.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kamryn. If you live in the Michigan area, keep your ears open for the events that we will have coming up that Kamryn will be putting on. If you want to know how you can learn more about those events, visit our website at keepourrepublic.org. And I will see you guys next week. Thanks very much.
If you like this episode, please share it on social media and tell your friends. It's the best way for folks to find out about us. I hope you'll agree that our guest is indeed a keeper of the Republic. If you want to learn more about how you can help keep our Republic, stop on over to our website, keepourrepublic.org.